Be here when you are.
Well, there's Bart. You're muted, Courtney.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't have my full screen on, so I thought we were still waiting for commissioners. Sorry. I just don't see.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I think we're still, Amber's trying to still getting the meeting.
Is Lisa not going to?
Where's Lisa? I'm sorry, I don't see her either.
Yeah, don't either.
I'm disinclined to start without them.
Understood. Let me send the link out.
Oh, there she is. Okay.
Oh, there's Lisa.
Has anyone heard from Amber? I can try to call her.
Did you send her a message?
I did earlier. She texted me about a link. I sent it to her and I didn't hear back from her. I'll just call her real quick.
Oh, there she is.
She should be coming, I think. She was having internet issues on top of link issues.
Evening, everyone.
Yay! All right.
Too many Zoom meetings.
Yeah. Okay, I think everyone is here now. This is Mayor Courtney Shipley. This is the Tuesday, January 18th City Commission meeting. Normally we would have some announcements here at the beginning, but because we have another study work session with a guest, we'll save those for after that, and that way the public that's coming in after 5:45 will know what our regular rules are. So let's go ahead and do roll. Oh yeah, that's me. I do that. Okay. Vice Mayor Larson.
I'm here.
Commissioner Finkeldye.
Here.
Commissioner Littlejohn.
Here.
Commissioner Sellers.
Present.
Excellent. Everyone is here. Let me just double check. Sherry, are we okay? You got everything you need?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And with that, again, let me welcome our guest, Professor Nalbandian, highly respected and esteemed, and I must again thank him profusely for speaking with us on his area of expertise. So I won't go on, but thank you again for being here.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and it's nice to see everybody again. Thank you for spending your time with me. I appreciate it very much. So today we're going to continue and look at the two things, the attributes of the high-performing governing body, and also expectations that you have of each other that will contribute to the high performance. I think when you looked at the documents that I sent, you might have noted that they were a little bit, they're in my mind, they're dated a little bit. And so it will be very important for you to be adding to those, modifying them to bring them up to contemporary standards, and also to make them relevant to your own work. But before we get to that, I thought we just very briefly just look back at last week when we talked about the gap and we talked about values. And we talked about different perspectives of council and staff, elected officials and staff. And I wondered whether there was anything from that session that particularly stood out for you in terms of helping to understand what the heck's going on here. Any particular learning going on there that you'd like to share?
Commissioner Littlejohn, it was the different expectations and how there can be miscommunication. I think that was
John
definitely
Nalbandian
helpful and to give us a new perspective.
Okay. Other thoughts from last week?
Mayor Shipley, you said something really interesting that I liked and I highlighted it. And it was, I believe you were remarking on efficiency, and that I think you said you can't only focus on efficiency because it will come back to hurt you. I thought that was a fascinating, what did Amber call it last week? A Nalbandian nugget. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen that, you know, in places like Ferguson, Missouri. And well, Craig could tell us about that a little bit. Ferguson's not very far from where he was the manager. So, but anyway, yeah, efficiency is one of 4 values. Any other thoughts?
Commissioner Finkeldye, I wrote down a lot of things, but I highlighted politics and administration are different ways of thinking.
Have you experienced that, Brad?
Yes, I've experienced that. For sure. And it's certainly been something, you know, as I try to work my way through this. I mean, obviously it goes to your main point, which is bridging between what you want to do and what you operationally can do. So absolutely.
Good.
So this is Vice Mayor Larson. I think one of the points that I kind of stuck out in my head was when you talked about that as commissioners, we don't necessarily have the right to be listened to, but we must earn the respect of our fellow commissioners in order for that to happen.
And this is Commissioner Sellers. I guess I can't be the last one. Can't be the last one and one not to speak, but I do appreciate all my previous commissioners and their comments. I think the biggest that struck with me was one, Commissioner Finkeldine brought it up in regards to the political piece and the administrative piece, but most importantly, the aspect of bridging and the role that we play in our commission manager form of government, which maybe many in our community don't really understand, and what that impact is in regards to our relationship to the work we do in relationship with Craig serves as our manager, as well as to being that extension to the staff. And Professor sorry, I catch my breath here. Nalbandian really, in the graphic that you had, that showed the different lines and what they represented as far as where that connection piece is and where the strength of that is. I think that speaks volumes as to understanding our role and our path and how we can stay focused and committed to the work we are charged to do in relationship to what we charge our manager to do and what we have what the authority of city staff can do within their realms.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that has struck me is that I think especially for residents who haven't lived here for a long time, that the news that you get about public officials on TV or the internet or whatever, when it comes to mayors, information about mayors, inevitably it's about a big city mayor. You know, in big city mayors, that's fine, except it's a different form of government. And so if it's not, to some extent, part of what you have to do is, you know, you're in the process of educating residents about the form of government, and also commissioners who may be elected and don't really fully understand. Anyway, thank you all. Thanks for that very much. So we're going to look at the attributes and the expectations, but I thought first I just tell you just a little intro to why I do this. And it's because the conditions that you work under as commissioners are not really common in many other work settings, especially in a large organization. Now, if you're a sole proprietor, these may not be as relevant as if you're working in an organization and have that experience. But think about your work here, where you have no supervisor who can discipline or coach you, okay? You have a very vague job description, if any. And if you have a job description, it probably does not say much about how you actually spend your time. It probably says something about your responsibilities, but not so much how you spend your time. And then you have no systematic performance appraisal. So it's not like those of you who work for the state, you know, you have a supervisor, you have a job description, you have an annual performance appraisal. So in the absence of those things, then see, those things provide structure, which enable you then to utilize your talents within that framework. But in the absence of that, you have to create the framework. And that's what the expectations are about, is trying to provide you with some structure. What do you expect of each other? And so then with that knowledge, and to the extent that you can commit to those things and live by those things, you will be able to deploy your talents effectively. So Craig's going to take notes tonight. Craig, did you realize you're going to take notes tonight? And then he'll draft a version of the attributes and the expectations based on our discussion, or your discussion, with the goal of coming up with a list of attributes and expectations that are yours. And so he would then bring a list back to you, and then you would talk about it, and so on and so forth. In addition, if you find this conversation useful, you could also engage in it. I think I said this before, focusing on your relationship with staff and also with the city manager. Okay, Craig, I'd like to finish this intro before we get into the questions by asking you, why do things like attributes and expectations, why have they been important to you in the experiences that you've had in other places?
City Manager Craig Owens, thanks, John. The work of the commission or the elected body is a really important piece for the executive and the staff to understand direction. So we look at this a little bit selfishly and singularly. A decision that's got clarity, that moves us in a direction, gives us what we need to make things less confusing when we're trying to do our work. So I find that we kind of fixate on, okay, what's the decision and what's the direction? And it's richer than that. As our staff conversations noted Wednesday morning, when we were talking about the last meeting, the values and how much more complex it is than many staff members recognize. There's a lot more going on than a vote and a decision. So I think these ways of operating help us kind of translate for useful information so that we can carry the work forward. And it's not just us, it's the community, the appointed advisory boards and commissions. There's a broad audience, I think we understand. And the more cohesive and predictable, and I don't mean that to minimize it, but to more predictable way that we know that we're taking actions and moving our community forward, the more useful it is and more efficient it is to us. But also I think it is to the community. I think it is to a lot of stakeholders who are invested in the outcomes of the decisions of this body. And so the more kind of sense it makes, and to some degree predictability, the more value and more complexity we can add at a different place. When the process is complex, you tend not to add the complexity of the challenges of the community. You kind of want to simplify it because we can't have too many moving pieces in all directions. So I would say, to me, anything where we can have a little bit more predictability and organization in what John acknowledges can be a very dynamic and undulating environment. The more we can kind of make some sense of that, the more we can add the complexity in doing the work that is policy work that we need for the community. So I'd say and it's selfish, and I'm really exposing the staff perspective on that. But I think anything we can do to organize it and then have some predictability is good. And anything really also that keeps us from bumping against that 11 o'clock at night with the work that this community needs done, anything we can do to try and help that be successful and get more out of each agenda is also an important thing.
Okay, thanks, Craig. So the staff will be taking some notes here and bringing a document back to you so that you can consider it and move on from there. So let's start with the questions that I posed for you. Which 2 or 3 of the attributes of the high-performing governing body, which 2 or 3 of the attributes are most important, do you think? Why are they most important? And then we'll talk about what's missing. So I want to hear first from those who've had the experience on the council, and then we'll ask everybody to weigh in on this. So who wants to get us started? Courtney, Brad, Lisa?
This is Commissioner Larson. I'll go ahead and start. First of all, I don't think it's fair that, John, that you are making us only pick 2 or 3. That's tough. This is definitely a good list of items, I think, that strike me as being important as far as being a commissioner. A few of them that I would rank a little bit higher than maybe some of the other ones is the idea that it's important to work as a team with our fellow commissioners, as well as between the commissioners and staff. I think that's extremely important to understand that we're on a team here and we're trying to decide what's best for the community as a group, and we should move forward that way. The other is, another item would be effectively and prudently engaging citizens in decision-making and policy-making. I think it's extremely important that we engage our community as much as possible. Obviously, we work for them, and it's important to hear and to listen to what they have to say about how they want their government to run. So I think it's important to do, and it's very respectful at that. So I know you said 2. I'm going to go ahead and just add one more in here. And I think professional demeanor is extremely important in order to maintain a line of communication with all your fellow commissioners. The idea of having that professional decorum is just so important to make sure those lines of communication stay open. When that doesn't happen, then sometimes you will get either a tendency to possibly make folks not want to open up and be real forthright. So those are a couple of them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Courtney or Brad?
Commissioner Finkel, all 3 that Commissioner Vice Mayor Lawson brought up, I had definitely had on my narrowed down list. In particular, I had the effectively and prudently engaging citizens. I also did priority setting, and I think in our context that means strategic plan. Really being focused on the strategic plan and making that clear. And then the last one, which was balancing competing interests and compromise. There's lots of things you can vote up and down, and sometimes there's no middle ground. There's just a yes or no. But often there's the ability, to find the balance of those competing interests and compromise. And I think that's an important part of what we do. Sometimes that's a compromise between, maybe a staff position and a city position. Maybe sometimes it's a compromise amongst ourselves. But really understanding those competing interests and balancing them, I think, is the important part.
Thank you. Mayor?
Mayor Shipley, I agreed with Commissioner Finkeldye on 10. 10 and 12, particularly, for some of the same reasons. You can't make everyone happy 100% of the time, but you can get very close. And I think the only way to do that is to be good at communicating and for the back and forth and discussion amongst ourselves in public to be clear. And the other one, let's see. 3, although the having process forum for identifying most important issues, that also, I think, one of the reasons I liked it is it also kind of identifies some of the things we've committed to in our strategic plan. So that also as kind of a process and system person, I enjoy to figure out how systems work, and to a certain extent so that I can help other people navigate the system. So that's kind of one of the reasons that one reached out to me.
Okay, thank you. Bart and Amber, you're joining this group and a fresh perspective. So which of the attributes do you think are going to be the most important?
Commissioner Littlejohn, I guess I can go. I think number 12 is a pretty popular one. That's one I had marked down as well. balancing competing interest and compromise, because I think that's where you usually find the path forward. I had number one, listen as customer service representatives, but act as trustees, just because the dual nature of our position, and making sure that that we still have balance and have both feet in both, or each foot in each arena. So, yeah, it's my third one I was struggling with, but I was is either a toss up between or work as a team within council and between council and staff, or honestly, number 5, we are clear what our work is, because you can't really go anywhere if you don't have direction. So.
Commissioner Sellers, I struggled a little bit with this, but I would say my top 3 would be first, number 3, having process and forums to identify the most important issues and processes. I don't know, I guess because I'm a word and term person, I kind of struggled with most important issues. I think it relates to competing interests and competing values. And we talked about that a little bit last week, as far as, you know, we're not superheroes. We can't tackle everything. There's a reason why you compromise and you navigate that. There are going to be things that we discuss, issues, projects that we deal with that are important, but they may not be of high priority. But having a process or forums in place of how we engage and identify those, and that there's a consensus between the commission on what that is. I feel like you have to have that in order to do number 5 or even number 7. We can't be clear about the work unless we know what the process for executing that work. It's difficult, and this is from my perspective. How do we respond to most important issues could be reflective of understanding what our process is for doing that. I think Craig shared a great example with Commissioner Littlejohn and myself in our orientation about how to, when you're receiving multiple emails from constituents, and how do we navigate that? And being a new commissioner, you may feel like I have to have the answer, or they're expecting the answer from me, and we're new to this system. So if I don't understand the processing or my role in the processing, I may end up burning out my gears before I even started. So number 3 was important to me. Next was number 2. Council members listen to each other and talk with each other. This, I think when we are speaking and when it's the matter of the business of the city, again, it goes back to those competing values and how we listen to each other and engage with each other within COMA, and how we navigate that work is important. And are we really listening to each other? And are we using coded language as a way to dissuade someone, one of our fellow commissioners, from truly understanding what our intent is? So again, that goes back to how do we navigate those competing values, those competing interests, and also how we engage in building consensus within our commissioners. So that's one for me. And then the last one is number 9, holding city manager accountable for results. This is a partnership, and it's important to us as we explain our form of governance to our community to understand that the work just doesn't fall on us, and that it is a relationship, and that we have to be able to explain to the community that success is when all 3 elements of our form of government is functioning, and that we understand the process and we engage and we are holding each other accountable. And so Craig depends on me to be at my best, or at least as close to my best, and engaging him in that, understanding my vulnerabilities, engaging, asking those difficult questions, asking him those difficult questions when it comes to it, but also making sure that the work is being done, and how do we engage with him and what the work that our staff is doing. So just as much as, we don't have that PRF or we don't have that performance evaluation, there has to be metrics for Craig to engage with me just as much as I need to have metrics to engage with him to ensure that we're both communicating and engaging in a way that's successful, that we're both being successful, because that means that there's going to be success in how services and goods are shared with the community. So those are my 2, 3, and 9.
Great. So it's like there are just a couple that weren't mentioned there. So it looks like it's a pretty good list. What I would ask you now is a couple of things. One, what is missing from the list? And also, there's nothing on this list about social media. So what would a really positive attribute or characteristic of a city commission be with regard to the use of social media? Easy question, huh?
This is Commissioner Sellers. I'll put myself out there. Maybe timely communication of, it could be just important events, whether it's an outage. It could be just, I think, timely communication of important matters. So it could be job openings, it could be whether a change in a service route, things of that nature. So using it as another form of quickly getting information out, quickly disseminating information out.
Mayor Shipley, are you actually asking us about the possible and likely divisions that our individual social media may have or take, and not just amongst ourselves, but between ourselves and the city as an organism? Is that what you're actually asking me here?
What the question grows out of what I've heard in other places, which is that individual commissioners can utilize social media, some are more predisposed than others, okay, to use social media when it comes to communicating with citizens, residents, and that in fact, on occasion, that can raise divisions among the commissioners. So a council member who is not satisfied with what another commissioner said, or the result of a decision, could get on social media and kind of go on a rant and create issues. In fact, I heard one where it said it's gotten so confusing that there are times when residents don't know whether the individual commissioner through social media is responding as an individual commissioner versus is acting as the voice of the council, the commission. So anyway, you might think about that, because it's not something that's here, but I'm sure there's been stuff that's written about it, and Craig could survey some other places and see what they've, what they've included. Okay.
And Professor Nalbandian, this is Commissioner Sellers. To that point, I think it opens up communication as to what an elected official is utilizing, what are they using their social media for? And I know for me, utilizing what little footprint I have on social media, because it is quite it's a struggle for me, is more of information share and never putting something out there that the community writ large could perceive as being division or me speaking outside of the consensus of the governing body, which is the city commission or the commissioner. So I think that you bring up an excellent point, and I think it goes into what is that individual using it for? And you know, for me, I've never thought to use it as a perception of trying to sow a seed of doubt or division, but more of the information to share that as your commissioner, I'm another conduit to get information out to you, to engage you in what is available, whether it's a job opening, board and commission openings, wonderful activities that, you know, Parks and Rec are doing or something like that, never on a specific topic per se, but I would be interested to know what other commissioners thought.
Okay. Craig, do you have any thoughts on this?
City Manager Craig Owens. I don't think it's just social media. I think it's media, more traditional media as well. It is a very, compared to other places I've been served, it is a pretty wide open space here. They're usually, the mayor is the spokesperson and speaks only on behalf of the entire city and represents the city's position on things rather than individuals speaking on issues that are policy issues. But here, it's pretty open forum, and frequently you will see, whether it's social media or traditional media, multiple opinions expressed. You know, I think very thoughtfully and in context, in my experience, but that is something, you know, that it hasn't been addressed, as far as I can tell, hasn't really been addressed here with the elected body.
Okay. And maybe no need to. So, but keep an eye on it. Okay, keep an eye on it. Let's move to the second piece here, which is the expectations that you have of one another. Which do you think are most important? And again, let's start with the senior members, and let's see where we are on that. Who wants to start?
Commissioner Finkel, I'll jump in. Again, all of these are pretty good. But my first one was respect each other, staff, and the public, and the process, especially in a public setting. I think you can never have too much respect for any of those situations. Treating the public, treating staff, and treating each other with respect is, to me, utmost important. And you know, the way we work with each other. You know, kind of second to that was number one, which was very similar, but respect each other's opinions and do not speculate on the motives of others. Disagree with respect and don't put down the others, you know, based upon your knowledge or whatever reason. You know, disagree with respect and respect opinions. I appreciate, again, I think that goes to the compromise part of it, which again goes to the last one I picked, which is number 10, is if the vote doesn't go your way, try to find a way to support some aspect of the issue, all kind of related to what we were just talking about. You know, we are a commission, so if, you know, the vote goes one way and I'm on the losing side of that vote, or if I'm on the winning side, but, you know, say I'm on the losing side of that vote, it's still a commission decision, and we need to support that commission decision moving forward, because that's what our staff is going to do, and that's what's moving us forward. So, and again, in the sense of compromise, in the sense of respect, you take that decision and move forward.
This is Vice Mayor Larson. I'm gonna go next. So I would agree with Commissioner Finkeldine on number 1 and number 7 regarding this respect issue. I think it's vital that that we have and exhibit respect to all of our commissioners as well as staff and the public. And that is really, to me, the foundation of everything going forward. And if we can't respect each other as well as our community members, then it's going to be hard to build on anything. It's going to be a really weak foundation to build on. So I would highlight those two as my most important ones, because that's the foundation of what we're doing here.
Mayor?
Mayor Shipley. Yeah, sorry, I'm flipping back and forth between your lovely faces and your list. Yeah, I like number 3 because I'm a questioner, and I'm always trying to get to the bottom of, call the question and try to figure out what we're really talking about. Asking the most questions and having the most understanding of what someone is thinking about or is focusing on helps me in decision making. Number 6, we're elected at large, and we need to make decisions based on what we think is good for the whole city. I think it's an interesting one because that's something that can get lost. Occasionally, and I'm going to bring this up, I was thinking about it when you were talking only moments ago about social media, is the unfortunate way that Americans run campaigns, and the way certain things can, during your campaign cycle, the need to commit to certain things. I'm definitely going to do this, and I promise to do that, can really be, can interfere with the work we need to do together. And I think it's a disservice not to remind each other that the American way of running campaigns is a fact of what we do. And the other one, the respect each other. Yes, of course. Respect is a two-way street, not just with other commissioners, but also with the public. Occasionally we'll have someone who maybe goes over the line in public comment, not very often, and the discussion of like, how do we address that and be respectful of freedom of speech. I think those conversations are really important. And also that we be self-confrontational about what respect means in a primarily in a system that was created for white men by white men, and giving respect to the person who deserves respect, but you don't. I want to point those things out. And professionalism and these ideas, these are built on a system that wasn't for me or some of my other commissioners. So sometimes when we use these words, some of these things are a little bit loaded, and we need to be able to be self-confrontational about what the actual behaviors are around that and what system perpetuates them.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Bart and Amber?
This is Commissioner Sellers. This one I wouldn't say I wrestled with. But again, just I think maybe this was me getting in the weeds a little bit as far as it says the following expectations. And to have two on here that speaks to respect of opinion and respect of individuals. So respect of the individual as it relates to their opinion, and respect of the public and individuals. I guess going into this role, if you're not leading with respect, and respect has to be an expectation, that says a lot about the individual and what you take from this role. I don't know if I could serve in a role where it's not required of me to be respected and my commissioners did not respect me. So I didn't choose one that had respect in it, and that's no indictment on my fellow commissioners or anything. I think it speaks a little bit to what Mayor Shipley was saying is I chose to campaign to be in this role because I believed in the attributes and abilities that I have to be of service to my community and to raise the level of knowledge, capacity, opportunities for my community. and I know that respect is not always given, but I think to call yourself a city commissioner and to not respect those that you sit on the dais with, as well as you engage with in city staff and as well as with the city manager, then I would question why you choose to serve as a commissioner. So that was what I struggled with. But needless to say, my top three were number three, try to have a good understanding of the other person's view before critiquing it. Because we are limited on how we can engage and how many and who we can, not who, but how many we can engage with, that makes it difficult. And so trying to understand and engage and get an understanding of my fellow commissioners and getting the opportunity to reach out to them to say, hey, would you like to engage with me on this particular agenda item, or would you like to talk about this piece? And having that opportunity to get to know them from that capacity is important to me. And I hope that that's the expectation of our seasoned as well as new commissioners in this role. Next, I would have number 6. This is one I wouldn't say I struggle with, but about the idea of being an at-large and what role that and the importance of what that means is understanding the many voices of our community, but ensuring that I am making a decision based on, to that last part, what is good for the city as a whole. And then if you look at number 10, if a vote doesn't go your way, try to find a way to support it in some aspect of the issue. I know Commissioner Finkeldye brought that up. And going into, I would imagine, or at least with me, 90% of the time, if I'm going into a vote or a decision, I know 90% of the time where I'm going to leave. And knowing that I'm not leaving it there, I know that to continue to push this through, I need to be involved and engaged in some capacity of that vote, even if it didn't go my way. Because if I want to serve in this capacity again, I need to be able to show the community where, yes, I may not have, agreed with the decision that was made, but I engaged in it. And I think that goes back to number 6, because we represent the large. There's going to be some aspect of decisions that we make by vote that one part of our community may not agree with, and one part of our community does agree with. But I made the vote based on what was best for the city as a whole. And I have to be able to understand, how can I continue to be and support that aspect of that issue, because I know it may represent one part of this community that really believes in it. So I think 6 and 10, there's a little bit of a relationship to it. And then also number 3.
Thank you. Bart?
Yeah, Commissioner Littlejohn. I went with number 2 because I usually live by the motto, expect the unexpected, keep your head on a swivel. So it's people can surprise you. So I think that was pretty apropos. And number 7, but like Commissioner Sellers said, that's kind of a baseline thing, I would think. And number 6, we always should just keep in mind that we're just trying to do the best that we can for as many people as we can. So, and to always keep that in mind, the forefront of our thinking.
Okay, you guys, thanks very much. We've run out of time, so that doesn't mean that this process has to end here. Okay, so Craig will bring some things back to you. You continue the discussion. If I can be of service, let me know. I will leave you with, based on the things that you've said, it reminds me of, I said this last week, but it reminds me of what Jim Oliver, noted manager in Virginia, said to me one time. He said, John, what council members don't realize is that their most important constituent is the other council members. And you all seem to be expressing that. So let's see, Craig or Mayor, you want to say anything as a kind of a final thought here?
Go ahead, Craig. Got something?
City Manager Craig Owens, just that I think I heard Sherry giggle when you asked me if I was taking notes. She's really good at it, and I couldn't stop her if I tried. But so we will put these together and bring them forward for maybe an adoption on a consent agenda, or we can pull them in and have another conversation when it's something else that you can have. And the other thing that I imagine is that I hope this becomes a tradition that we retouch these maybe annually, but certainly after every election. I think that would be a good thing for us just to renew and set a baseline for future commissions.
Let me make a suggestion that you could revisit these after you have gone through a particularly difficult issue and have decided it. You could do an after action report based on the attributes and the expectations. That would be the real test of them. Mayor?
Thank you again. I can't express enough gratitude to you for being here with us and sharing all your knowledge. Alas, I must move on. As you point out, we've kind of come to our past our time to begin the meeting. So what I'm going to do here is go ahead and switch it back over to Porter to give us our beginning of the meeting announcements.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everybody. I just have a few housekeeping items for this Zoom meeting tonight. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. Please remember to mute yourself during the meeting unless you are speaking. The chat function for the meeting is disabled. All chats will go to me. Unless you are participating during the meeting, please turn your video off. This allows the active meeting participants to be seen on the screen. You will still be able to hear the meeting. When you are participating in the meeting, please turn your video on. If you have any trouble, you can send me a chat. Please remember to state your name each time you speak for the benefit of those participating remotely. The city reserves the right to mute people or turn individual videos off to minimize distractions during the meeting. And now I'll turn the meeting back over to Mayor Shipley.
Thank you, Porter. And so now we will let Sherry give us some other rules about how our comment particularly works.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, just some reminders for the virtual meeting. Please remember, commissioners and staff, please remember to state your name and title each time you speak. When a motion is made, the mayor will call on commissioners individually to provide their vote, then announce whether the motion carried and the count of the vote. When the mayor calls for in-person public comment, individuals should raise their hand to indicate they wish to speak. Staff present will direct you to the podium to speak following social distancing and safety protocols. Please state your name before speaking and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Individuals participating via Zoom should use the raise hand function to indicate they wish to speak. The raise hand function may appear in different places on your Zoom menu depending on the device you are using and which version of Zoom you have. Individuals will be called upon by name in the order they appear on the meeting host screen. When you are called on, please unmute and state your name. And again, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor Shipley, I do want to go back. We did not approve the agenda yet, which is item A. So let's go ahead and do that. Are there any changes to the agenda that commissioners would like to make? Not hearing anything. Do we have any do we have anyone who would like to approve?
Vice Mayor Larson moved to approve the agenda.
Commissioner Finkel, second.
Thank you so much. Hearing a first and a second, Vice Mayor Larson.
Aye.
Commissioner Finkeldye.
Aye.
Commissioner Littlejohn.
Aye.
Commissioner Sellers.
Aye.
Mayor Shipley, that passes 5-0. We've already done item B, our orientation and conversation with Professor Nalbandian. And the next item is our consent agenda. All matters listed below on the consent agenda are considered under one motion and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Members of the public wishing to speak to an item that has been pulled off consent agenda will be limited to 3 minutes for comments. Is there anything that a commissioner would like to pull from the consent agenda? Oh, not seeing anything. Sherry, do we see anyone there in the audience who would like to pull anything from consent agenda?
No, Mayor.
Mayor Shipley again, is there anyone on virtual or on Zoom who's, oh, I see a hand.
Yes, Michael Allman.
Hi, thank you, Mayor Shipley. I'd like to pull item C8C, Charlie 8 Charlie.
Mayor Shipley, thank you. Is there anyone else, Sherry, indicating online that they want to pull anything?
No, Mayor.
Mayor Shipley, let's continue then. Do we have any motions to approve with the exception of C8C?
Commissioner Finkeldine, I move to approve the consent agenda with the exception of C8C.
Commissioner Sellers, I second.
Hearing a first and second, Commissioner Finkeldine,
Aye.
Commissioner Sellers,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Larson,
Aye.
Commissioner Littlejohn.
Aye.
Mayor Shipley, that's 5-0. Let's then go back and look at C8C. Mr. Ullman, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor Shipley. This is Michael Allman, and I will do my darndest to respect the 3-minute limit. It's hard. I'm speaking for the Brook Creek Neighborhood Association at this point, and if I'm reading this agenda item correctly, when it was on last week's agenda, the fiscal impact numbers didn't pencil. I think that's right. It seemed like there was an $800,000 shortfall, and it was deferred to this week as a result of that, I assume, because the fiscal impact is different now. Now it's 8 million instead of 7,600,000, so there's a $400,000 shortfall. What I am objecting to is the staff is trying to maintain a revenue neutral budget, which is good, but shorting our neighborhood by taking that money from the East 19th Street construction. East 19th Street has been waiting for 10 years. Brook Creek neighborhood, well, this got proposed 10 years ago, and Brook Creek neighborhood had worked for all that time to get a good resolution as to size and configuration. And thanks to the commission, we do have a street design that will satisfy everybody as far as I can tell. But what happens now with this $400,000 taken away? So now I'm switching my hats to Sustainability Action Network. If you had chance in the last 2 weeks to read our letter, we're proposing to save the city anywhere between $1 and $1.5 million at a project at around 6 million total by right-sizing the street, which means making it 3 lanes instead of 2 lanes. Wakarusa south of 23rd Street is pegged by KDOT, at least in their plans, to become a 3-lane street, 2 travel lanes for motor vehicles and a center turn lane. North of Bob Billings, Wakarusa is 4 lanes. This section between Bob Billings and 23rd is ideal for a transition to right size down to 3-lane because it doesn't get anywhere near the commercial traffic that north of Bob Billings does. So that's the long and the short of it. I can answer any questions, but you know, we had an opportunity on Castle to save $1 million, and we didn't go with the 3-lane street. And in my opinion, that didn't work out very well. So we have a chance here to really design a street that will work well for the motorists, and we're grateful for the shared use paths for bicycles and pedestrians. I have to add that. I want to make sure. But I hope you consider this as a good way to save money and serve multimodal traffic solution. Thank you very much.
Mayor Shipley, thank you. Are there any questions from city commissioners on this?
Commissioner Finkel, aye. I think on number one, could someone answer the question about the 400,000? I believe that's a cost savings, but someone could explain that from staff.
Sure. Good evening, commissioners. Jake Baldwin, engineering program manager. So the original construction budget for East 19th Street was $2.2 million. That project was awarded for less than $2 million back in December. However, before the award, we had some excess federal funding in the amount of $400,000 that we moved into that project to bump its construction budget up to 2.6. So recognizing that we've got excess budget in that project and a shortfall for the concept here, it's staff's intention to move that $400,000 from the project East 19th that's already been awarded and is adequately funded into the Wakarusa project.
Commissioner Finkel, thank you.
This is Vice Mayor Larson. I had a question for you, Jake. So the 19th Street came in lower than the budgeted amount. What's going to happen to the rest of that money that did not that doesn't have to be used for that project, other than 400,000?
Sure. Engineering program manager Jake Baldwin. I'm not sure what the plan is at the moment. I'm assuming it would be a construction contingency, and then after construction, after change orders and project closeouts wrapped up, I think staff can make a recommendation on that.
Thank you.
Mayor Shipley, any other questions for staff or?
I have Commissioner Littlejohn. Jake, could you just go into the rationale of why it was proposed to make this road 4-lane, 2 on each side, as opposed to 1 on each side with a turning lane?
Sure. Engineering program manager Jake Baldwin. Thanks for the question. This is an existing 4-lane roadway. Traffic volume is somewhere in the neighborhood of 16,000 vehicles per day. So really, once you get above that 10 to 12,000 vehicles per day, that's kind of a cutoff where you want to consider doing anything less than 4 lanes. Once you get above that, really you decrease the level of service in the road, which makes it a less safe road. You end up with more queuing, platooning, more accidents, and eventually, you're going to lead to traffic cutting through neighborhoods.
Mayor Shipley, any other questions? Since you brought it up, Jake, the numbers that you quote there and level of service, which is something you engineers use all the time and can be up somewhat to your discretion as our local engineer and knowing what the current conditions are locally. I don't disagree, not that it matters, that many of our streets do need to be reconsidered. Perhaps at the time that they were built, we anticipated a higher density of people or usage. And often the things you base it on are models that are, in many cases, just a pretty good guess. So could you maybe talk a little bit about the numbers that you threw out at us there? And they're just a little bit higher than me over here on Castle. So the difference in behavior when there's 4 lanes versus 3 lanes, or any of those comments that you'd like to share your knowledge on?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Jake Baldwin, Engineering Program Manager. I'm actually going to turn this question over to Jonathan Marburger, who's our consultant with JEO and is a traffic expert subject matter.
Are you able to hear me now? Great. So if I understand correctly, the question, comparing to Cassold and the level of service in terms of what we're seeing as far as traffic numbers and where we're coming up with those, existing counts today, so not even using a crystal ball to forecast into the future, existing counts today are over 16,000 vehicles a day. On Castle Drive, I've actually got the city traffic map, the latest counts from KDOT up. North of Bob Billings on Castle, there's about 9,000 vehicles a day. So there's over 50% more traffic on this section of Wakarusa today than there is on the section that got completed between 6th Street and Bob Billings. And then, in terms of developable property, there's a pretty major office complex. They've built one out of, I believe, 5 buildings that are approved in that plat. And so there's a pretty significant amount of additional potential development along the corridor that we see could add even more traffic. And as Jake mentioned, if we reduce the level of service, cars will look for the really the least friction way to get through town. And, so that could push people over to Inverness, which is a safe route to school, where, you really don't want through traffic going through the neighborhood if you can help it. So that's where we've tried to identify from a route consistency standpoint and a traffic management standpoint, the recommendation to go with that 2 lanes in each direction scenario.
Mayor Shibley, and since you're here, I do what I meant, since someone already pulled it, so we're already having this conversation. And I felt very good about the discussion between yourselves and the Multimodal Transportation Commission. But for the sake of the public, just briefly, could you talk to me about how a roundabout actually keeps traffic moving better than a light?
You bet. Yeah. So the roundabout operates very well during the peak hour for both Wakarusa Drive and 18th Street. And so right now today, if you're getting on Wakarusa from 18th, particularly if you're trying to cross the street or turn left, there can be significant delays trying to time a gap. And indeed, that's where we see a lot of the crashes that occur in the corridor, is those vehicles trying to turn on to Wakarusa. And so what a roundabout does is it reduces the delay not only to the main line, who doesn't have a traffic signal today. So if we installed one, there's a certain number of people that are going to have to stop at a red light, where the roundabout is essentially free flowing for the most part, and except for the most highest of volumes. And then the side road wouldn't have even the stop sign. Everybody's just turning right. And so the delay to the side road, you've been at a traffic signal where maybe you're the only car there and you're waiting for that light to turn green, and the actuator doesn't pick you up, or the loops in the pavement you don't think really exist or are doing anything. Maybe it's a placebo, and so those type of situations, you're never going to have to wait on 18th Street at 10 o'clock at night when there's nobody on the main line. You just go. And so that's how the overall level of service through the roundabout, ultimately outperforms, I would say, the traffic signal in terms of delay, which leads to reduced emissions from cars, et cetera. So, and economic time savings and all that good stuff.
Shibley, thank you for mentioning emissions and gas savings, because that is something that we are sustainability is something we're trying to be focused on in our strategic plan. That's all kind of new to many of us, but the ask is for us to think about sustainability and all of the decisions we make. So I appreciate you bringing that up. One little last thing, and again, I wouldn't have even asked if somebody hadn't pulled it, but and I hope Dave Cronin's still here, Jake. When the Castle roundabout discussion was happening at that time, the roundabout would have been free through some program where it was because it was a safety issue, a safety enhancement, and the light was what cost more. So what's different about this project is the roundabout's costing more. And even though we can kind of show that safety is a factor here, especially with the volume of traffic, I wondered how we weren't able to capture any kind of KDOT funding or federal funding on that in this instance?
Yeah, this is Dave Krohn, the engineer. I can speak to that a little, Mayor Shipley. We did seek out some federal safety funds for that intersection, but we're unable to receive any. Previously when we looked at a roundabout on Castle and even the two roundabouts we put in on Wakarusa to the north at Harvard and Inverness that qualified for highway safety improvement funds. So there was some cost benefit analysis that was done that we were able to secure some funding for those improvements. So we were not able to get any at the roundabout on this project, but we did try and ask. So thanks.
Mayor Shipley, any other questions for staff? I think we do also still need to do public comment. Sherry, is there any public commenters there in the audience?
Related to this item?
Oh, no.
Okay, we're not quite to public comment yet. We're just wrapping one item that was pulled off consent. No, not here in the room, but we do have someone on Zoom. Chris Flowers?
Hi, this is Chris Flowers. I wasn't prepared to speak on this, but just some of the conversations got me thinking. First of all, I'd like to bring up, I think it was 2017. I don't even remember the report, but it was a study where some outside company did like research for us where they got basically the town's opinion. But where I'm going with this, it's the report that we're using, I think, for the stoplights, how we're getting them all synced up so we're waiting less in traffic. It came from that report. I think it was 2017, but it ranked like congestion as one of our like when it came to what the people in Lawrence wanted, we wanted less congestion, and it ranked high on that list. And it was one where they went out and they got people, so it was like a representative study done of our population. I bring this up because they're talking, your engineers were talking about less congestion, and I would just like to bring up whatever that 2017 study is. I can't remember. I'm not even sure if it was 2017. I just know it's something that was quoted, I think, as reason for why we're spending the money on the stoplights is because the town wants less congestion. And also when it comes to density, I'd like to point out that Plan 2040 calls for more density. So what we have now, like in street numbers, it's probably going to go up in the future if you're all planning on making more people living on blocks, unless that's, I don't know. I think that's just kind of BS that you're all going to cave into like the neighborhood groups when people are, when the NIMBYs say, hey, we don't want more people living in our neighborhoods. I think you're going to cave to them. But I mean, if you don't do what you say you're going to do, then you're going to be putting more housing in on blocks and just creating more density. So I think I'd listen to the engineers about keeping the numbers down so we don't have congestion problems. Thank you.
Mayor Shipley. Sherry, is there anyone else?
That's all the comment, Mayor.
Okay, great. Commissioners, any comments or discussion?
Commissioner Finkel, I would just jump in and say, I appreciate Michael's question on the, the 19th Street project. And I think another commissioner had the same question. So that might be something we look at going forward in agenda items, maybe putting a little footnote in about, if we're taking money from someplace else, is that fully funded, that sort of thing. But, and I also say, generally I'm open, to ideas of shrinking road sizes and considering those. I don't think this is the right spot for that, and I support this recommendation, but certainly I think going forward, we want to always look at those options in the right situations. But I support this one as it exists.
Mayor Shipley, any other comments from commissioners?
This is Commissioner Sellers. I agree with Commissioner Finkeldye on the basis of opportunities to shrink roads and recognizing that this is not one, not to impose my bias on the commission. Wakarusa is a road that I take quite frequently for work and for travel. So I have seen a lot of the concerns that were shared and the rationale for expansion and improvement and utilizing whether it's a light or a roundabout and being enlightened on the benefits of the roundabout as it relates to flow of travel. And so I appreciate getting that, learning that piece about it as well. And so I will say just based on some of the public meeting comments that were provided, I did appreciate that there was noted about identifying bus stops and curb cuts. I think not too many realize that there is a bus, route for Wakarusa that goes from 6th and Wakarusa to Iowa. I've utilized it once during our COVID times when we were sheltered in place and needed to go to the store and didn't want to take my own car. And so just ensuring that we are highlighting those multimodal aspects of having that ability to have shared road space, whether it's bikes and also utilizing transportation out, our bus lines and transportation out and having that being called out. So I really did appreciate that. So.
This is Vice Mayor Larson, and the East 19th project was one that was long and drawn out, and I remember working diligently with Michael as well as many of the neighborhood organizations on trying to get that street to a point to where it was a compromise. It was truly a compromise between very competing ideas. So I was also very curious as to the money, where the money was coming from on East 19th Street. It was good to see that the cost for East 19th Street came in lower, so that would allow us to use some funding. As far as the width of this street, I would agree that the traffic count of 16,000 a day would make it very difficult or reasonable to bring that down to 3 lanes at this point in time. So I support this project. I really appreciate the questions. And Michael, thanks for working with us on that past project as well as this one. Thanks.
Mayor Shipley, any other comments? I would say, I'm going to vote for this because it went through the process that we have developed, and because I do believe in the deliberation of multimodal. I think they're very studied, and I have a great deal of respect for the people on that commission, as I do many others. I will confess a certain kind of disappointment that it's, to me, it was an opportunity, for example, for protected bike lanes, as some other larger roads would have been. But having, multi-use paths on both sides, fine. I will always try to remind everyone that the way we have things set up is autocentric. We're making assumptions about whether people will drive individual vehicles into the future and whether or not people in Lawrence even want that. So those are assumptions that are made in the models. Those are assumptions made about the future. Another interesting assumption about this particular road is that Wakarusa has been planned to go all the way down over the Wakarusa River, whole other conversation, all the way down to some rural roads, which is a conversation no one has really had with planning about whether that's a development pattern that they support or that even that we would support. So some assumptions are about the volume of the traffic in the future and the behavior of people in the future. So those are things I just always want to point out, especially when we're talking about giant volumes of roads. Also to remind everyone that the larger the road is, the more people drive on it. As the gentleman pointed out, part of it is to keep people off Inverness or other roads. People choose roads based on all kinds of psychological factors. And I hope we just all remember, not just when we're making these decisions, but also when we're personally driving, that we are making all kinds of decisions as we're maneuvering in our community about other people's safety and about our own safety. And that the safety isn't just about the people in the car, it's also about the people outside the car. So these are always things I want to always bring up and remind us in our deliberations, but I will vote for this as I feel it's gone through the system and in the way that we have the system set up. And so I will approve it. Are there any motions?
Commissioner Finkel, I would move to approve to proceed with the final design plans for the recommended improvements as part of the Wakarusa Research Parkway to Clinton Parkway project, CIP MS-21-0017.
Vice Mayor Larson, second.
Mayor Shipley, I have a first and a second. Commissioner Finkeldye?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Larson?
Aye.
Commissioner Littlejohn?
Aye.
Commissioner Sellers?
Aye.
Mayor Shipley, aye. That passes 5-0. Now we can move forward to public comment. The public is allowed to speak on items or issues that are not scheduled for discussion on the agenda. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss or debate these items, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented during this time. Individuals should address all comments and questions to the commission. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes. Sherry, it seems like we must have someone there in the audience.
That's correct. Go right ahead.
So I'm back again. Been here for the last couple of years on and off. Very, very tired. But at the same time, I think about those that came before me and what they had to go through. And I have not been through as much physical trauma as my ancestors before, but I am tired. I was born in this boxing ring, fighting systemic racism. The last time we was here, I can't remember your name, but you spoke about Martin Luther King. And I remember him saying one time, justice delayed is justice denied. Same as change delayed is change denied. We've been coming here since 2015. I can remember coming here in 2016 when there's a lot of shootings going around in the United States and telling you guys that if we didn't get it together, it would be here. It started with Dominique White in Topeka. Actually, a man in Leavenworth got killed. Then Dominique White in 2017, I want to say, in Topeka, Kansas. And then if this wasn't a sign enough, one of your officers thought she had pulled a taser and pulled her gun and shot Mr. Lewis as he was trying to just move and pick his fiance up for work. Thank God that he lived. The reason why I can't sleep at night, and I'm really, I don't even know the word to look, I would say bothered, is because you guys keep acting like there's no issues within y'all police department. I'm bothered, like I said, when we came here in 2020, we started here because in the Martires Washington Jr. case, it started with your police. And y'all probably like, she keeps talking about this. The reason why I keep talking about this, because I can't unseen what you guys did to him. It should never even went to Charles Branson's desk, but the crooked police officers that was involved knew that Charles Branson and CJ Reed would back them up. The description of the male, black male, was a 21-year-old man. Now, do I have to embarrass you guys by showing you the interrogation of Martires Washington Jr.? looking like he's 12 years old. And the fact that nobody stood up that was watching behind that glass and said, there's no way this boy did this. Because what murderer would ask the police to not only give them a ride to a job interview, but to come in their house while they took a shower? And y'all think we got justice, but we didn't get justice, because this is what I can't understand. Lawrence Journal World in Facebook knew that his case was dismissed before him or his mom. This, what you had, this systemic racism is very deeply rooted in Lawrence, Kansas. Is backed up by the Lawrence Journal World, who time after time make articles, twist our words so that we can be criticized. Then we got the LPD, who knows that they got crooked DAs and prosecutors that is going to uphold this until there's real change. And I'm talking about, I'm tired of you guys coming up with these fake committees. I watch your, the Police Citizen Review Board. Y'all, they don't even know what they're doing. Y'all have not gave them no clear answers. I watched their meeting the other day when the captain came. Until y'all get real meetings and start trying to just find a black face. And I appreciate you guys being up there, but don't let them silence y'all. Don't let them use y'all to as a bandit like they did when they got us a black principal, when they got us a black chief, and when they got us a black superintendent. And I'm not saying all the police officers on the Lawrence Police Department is bad, but if you seeing something wrong, you're not speaking out, you're just as guilty as them. And y'all do have good officers, but if I was to speak and say their names, y'all would do them just like y'all did Chief Burns. And I'm done.
Thank you. Sherry, is there any further comment?
Yes, Mayor.
My name is Michael, LFK Accountability. In my recent comments here, I've talked about the need for accountability and outside oversight of the Lawrence Police Department. Tonight, I'm going to talk about the history of the Office of Public Accountability. And Trent, I really wish you'd pay attention when we're talking about police. 52 years that the Blue Wall's been denying what's going on, and they're ignorant about the murders of Nick Rice and Rick Dowdle. While the current department isn't responsible for the mistakes of 1970, our problem today is a result of the past, both recent and distant. The last decade or so, that they are responsible for, and that includes the time that Mr. Washington sat in jail waiting for his justice. The information wasn't made easy to look for trends, so I rearranged the data and broadened the date range. Obvious patterns appeared. More than half of all complaints are from citizens. Over 100 since 2009, and only 19 sustained. One of the most glaring disparities, citizens' complaints that are sustained versus internal actions. Then there's the variety of classifications used to dismiss citizen complaints. They spread them out. I compared sustained OPA complaints to the Kansas C-Post records. This data is indicative of a manipulated OPA process. 2020 was a year of national disruption and distrust of law enforcement, and Lawrence Police reported only 6 complaints. State and national data trends upwards while LPDs went down. We were advised to beware of false positives in the new OPA reports. I suggest this is an attempt to manipulate your future analysis of the data that they show you. 60% of internal complaints are sustained, ones from police officers, only 19% from citizens. Do you guys understand how improbable that result is? The false negatives that we've been misled by, denying 70% of citizen complaints is outside expected norms. Based on his comments at the CPRB meeting last week, I think Chief Lockhart likely agrees with that. Recategorizing citizen complaints, calling them cleared by exception, handling them at the patrol level, treating citizens like a threat. Then there's the pending file. Nothing is updated. These reports are such a priority that they don't update them until somebody calls them out on it. This is the totality of circumstances with the LPD and their OPA that we can't talk about. and just 3 more minutes of evidence that the LPD should not be trusted to police themselves.
Thank you, Sherry. Is there anyone else there?
Not in the, ma'am, are you providing? Okay. Not in the room. And online, yes. Chris Flowers?
Hi, this is Chris Flowers. I was going to make a different remarks, but I'll just save it for another time. I do want to voice my support for the people calling for police reform. I think they make some good points. I wanted to bring up what I heard a little bit ago about if in the future the people of Lawrence will still want cars. Of course we're still going to want cars. Why would we not want cars? And I don't understand why people are like, well, people might not want cars in the future. It's, why would we want, I mean, it's like inventions go. When it comes to inventions, we're inventing to make life easier. Like, why are we going to go backwards and start walking when we can be lazy and ride? I mean, I don't want to give up my car. And I think it's crazy. And the only reason people would give up cars is if you make it so difficult to drive and they have like where it's just easy to live life without a car. But that, I don't think Lawrence is going to be there for years to come. And I'm not giving up my car. And I think it's crazy to assume that people are going to want to give up their cars. So I'm just throwing that out there. Thank you.
Is there anyone else on Zoom who has general public comment? That's all the comment, Mayor.
Oh, great, thank you. With that, Mayor Shipley, let's go ahead and move on to our work session. The work session provides an opportunity for the City Commission to discuss items in greater detail. The Commission will take no binding action on items presented during this time. Work session topics are eligible for live public comment. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes. I'm not sure who's bringing this forward, but I know we have some presentation.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is Leah Roseland, Affordable Housing Administrator. At the December 21st, 2021 meeting, City Commissioners requested a presentation on the Kansas statewide housing needs assessment conducted by the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation and released in December 2021. This evening, it is my pleasure to introduce Ryan Vincent, the Executive Director of the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation, to provide a statewide overview of the report's findings and recommendations, in addition to a regional assessment of Douglas County themes, challenges, and opportunities. The report materials and Mr. Vincent's presentation are attached to the agenda for any commissioner or community member who would like to access those materials. I would like to extend my deepest appreciation to Mr. Vincent for sharing his time and expertise with us this evening. Welcome, Ryan.
Well, good evening, Leah and Mayor Shipley and members of the commission. Thanks so much for this opportunity. Hope you can hear me okay. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to pull up a PowerPoint. So please let me know if you have any issues seeing it. It may just take me a moment here. Just go to the beginning of the presentation. Can you see that okay? All right. Well, again, my name is Ryan Vincent. I'm Executive Director at Kansas Housing, and thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for your interest, and thank you for your partnership in helping Kansas Housing unlock home. I've got a lot to cover in a very brief amount of time, so I'm going to give a very quick overview of KHRC, the work that we do, the service that we provide. I'm going to talk about how this housing needs assessment came to be. I'm going to talk about some of the goals and the strategies that we at the state, with our partners, came up with for this study, and then talk specifically about Lawrence and Douglas County, as well as some next steps in enacting this study for your community, and our state. But let's start with KHRC itself. We are a nonprofit public corporation that administers a variety of housing and community programs. Our mission is simple. We help Kansans access the safe, affordable housing they need with the dignity they deserve. Well, who do we work with? We work with you, government officials and bankers and lenders and economic development providers. We work nonprofits, housing arms of different cities and counties, and we work with a number of different community partners in Lawrence, from tenants to homeowners to the city housing department to Lawrence Habitat for Humanity and great partners throughout the region. Overview of our programs themselves. We administer and fund everything from a literal shelter through emergency housing. We provide financing for domestic violence centers and homeless shelters in your community. We're able to provide tenant-based rental assistance and actual housing development, whether that's the administration of the state's low-income housing tax credits to a variety of different grant funds through the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We have a down payment assistance program. We provide weatherization assistance. As you have time, I encourage you to check out our website at kshousingcorp.org to learn about our programs and how we can help your community. I also will take just a moment to share that we administer a variety of emergency response programs in response to the pandemic. That includes our Kansas Emergency Rental Assistance, or CARA program, where we've provided over $6 million to Douglas County citizens in emergency rent, utility, and internet assistance. So we're thrilled to be a part of that, to work with your housing stabilization collaborative and good housing partners there in the community. But that's an overview of KHRC's programs themselves. So let's take a few minutes.
Real quick, I'm getting a lot of static there. I'm not sure if others are. Is it just my computer or? So maybe.
I think it might, Mayor Shipley, I think this might be his microphone. I've actually had this with some other Kansas people, but I don't know, maybe he just wants to check his mic real quick.
Yes, if you'll give me just a second, let me try switching over here. Apologies for this. I'm still trying to figure out how to get the screen going here. The joys of technical meetings, right? Is that any better?
Ryan, you might try calling in.
If you'll give me a minute, what I can do is try, well, give me just a minute here. Let me try calling in then.
Commissioner Finkelstein, Mayor, can we take a quick 5-minute break while he's working on that? And
Oh, sure. If that's great with everyone, I'm sorry. I lost track of time. Thank you so much for reminding me of everyone's needs. Let me look at the clock here and see what 5 minutes. Let's come back at 6:45. Is that okay with everybody? Great. All right. Thanks. Mayor Shipley, I think, oh, I don't see Commissioner Littlejohn yet. Give him a few seconds here. Excellent. Okay, we now have 6:45. I do need to take roll again. Vice Mayor Larson?
Here.
Commissioner Finkeldye?
Here.
Commissioner Littlejohn?
Here.
Commissioner Sellers? Mayor Shipley, I'm here. Okay, let's go back to our speaker. His microphone is much better, so let's try that again. Thank you.
All right, well, apologies for the technical difficulties. Everyone can hear me now better? Okay, I'm going to share my screen once again, and if you'll give me just a moment here. And I'm going to just go ahead and proceed with just a reminder that we administer a variety of different housing and community programs that run the spectrum of emergency housing to actual housing development to emergency response. But why we're here is to talk about our statewide housing study. And that's why I'm pleased to take this opportunity to share that for 30 years, the state of Kansas has not had a comprehensive housing study. Essentially, we've been administering programs and resources in the dark. It's been since the time of Governor Finney that we last had real data, real time to be able to make real decisions that impact your communities and our state. Because of that, we have been working with the Office of Rural Prosperity, the Department of Commerce, and our office to finance this comprehensive housing study for the state. It started with a roadshow. We went all over the state to over 80 different regional and stakeholder meetings. We met with approximately 4,500 Kansans through interactive surveys. We had great discussions with realtors and bankers and nonprofits and housing advocates. And we used US Census data, stakeholder data, as well as the comprehensive information that we learned in these study sessions to develop the information that we're going to be sharing here tonight. We worked with a committee of technical experts that included nonprofits and community leaders. It included regions from across the state, including Shawnee Douglas County. We were able to develop a number of different housing goals. Those goals are broken down from everything from freeing up more middle income housing to diversifying our state's housing stock. They included things like extending housing security. We learned through this process that we're actually losing more affordable housing units than we're gaining in our state and in your communities. We discussed the need to increasingly reinvest in our older housing stock, including vacant units. But if we're going to also address long-term housing needs, we discussed the need to build on the lack of trade labor in our state. And finally, we've got great programs and great partners and great resources, but we don't have enough people that can that are around that can be ambassadors for those programs. So those were the goals that we at the state level made for this this housing study. The strategies were broken down both at the state level and at the local level. At the state level, they included things like increasing funding for different programs, particular moderate income housing programs, extending and exploring new funding opportunities. But we also looked at local level, what you at the local communities in the city of Lawrence and across the state can do to impact and affect change from the goals that we were discussing. We broke down the data into not just state, but region. And I'm going to show you at the very end of the presentation how to access the specific information for the city of Lawrence and Douglas County that this study was able to compile. But beyond that, we also spent some time with a deep dive into Shawnee and Douglas County. Before I go into specifics on the findings that we have for Shawnee and Douglas County, though, I want to share just a couple of kind of disclaimers. One is that I'm a state housing official. I'm not an expert on Lawrence or Douglas County, even though I frequent your community and love your community. Lawrence is unique, and I think it's worth sharing because from an outsider's perspective, that you are a progressive community, you've got engaged stakeholders, and it speaks very highly for your commission, for your community, for your housing partners, the good work that you do, that you are truly a lead and an example of how to do a progressive housing policy for our state. So for that, I thank you. I also want to make sure that I share that Leah and a number of the folks within the city itself probably know that you have your own housing study that goes into more of a deep dive for the city of Lawrence. I believe it's been redone every couple of years, but I encourage you to make sure that you're exploring that as well. And finally, I do want to stress that just for purposes of administering a giant study for the state, we had to break it down into regions. We knew that Shawnee and Douglas County were unique, but we grouped them together for purposes of our study. That all said, we did have a public forum in May 2021. We had great response from both Shawnee and Douglas County. We had a listening session with your city staff and with officials and with economic developers. We got great feedback that I'm now going to share with you. A couple of the themes that we heard. One of those was that there does seem to be some, whether it's fair or not, some inconsistent review and approval processes at times that we were hearing for this particular region. That there's a mismatch between the cost of approval and then the desired outcomes. And what that means is that the city of Lawrence and the community is great about coming to funders and expressing a desire for more affordable housing. But the fact is that on the back end, that sometimes through maybe a cumbersome approval process, high cost of site development, utility services, specials, and expense, that ultimately can be difficult and cumbersome to get those developments finished. That's the mismatch that we were hearing about, whether that's just perception or whether that's reality. A couple things I think you should be aware of, as starting with population profile itself. The county's growing, you're doing wonderfully. You've got a 7% growth versus Shawnee counties, which is just 0.5%. The University of Kansas, obviously a major employer and stakeholder in your community, has been very stable, which is important. Douglas County itself is becoming more diverse and interestingly enough, is still less diverse overall than the rest of the state. You also have one of the youngest populations in the state, but you're experiencing some of the biggest growth for the over 55 age population, which I found interesting. Turning to household profile, the median household income has been increasing in the county, which again is wonderful. Vacancy rates itself tend to be lower than in most of the state. We generally like to see, just for purposes of a flexible housing market, vacancy rates around 6%. Last I saw it was running about 8% in Douglas County. But you're not seeing the high vacancies that rural areas or inner city areas are facing. So that speaks again well for Douglas County. The share of cost burden owners is decreasing in Shawnee County. In fact, Douglas County has the lowest owner occupancy rate in the state, which is interesting and probably reflects some of that unique dynamics of having the university here. The share of cost burden renters has been increasing, however, but that's particularly in Shawnee County and not so much in Douglas County itself. But it's worth noting that there are higher rents in Douglas County overall than in the state of Kansas. So that's kind of the household profile that we picked up in our study. Now let's talk about the housing stock itself. You've got some of the newest housing stock in the state, which again speaks well for the community, but certainly there are areas that have aging housing stock. You're seeing a lot of newer rental construction followed behind Johnson County as well. And then generally, overall, as compared to the rest of the state, we're seeing a newer population of housing stock and fewer homes being in poor condition, both multifamily and single family. So that's just that deep dive. Again, I'm going to show you where you can get about 16 pages of great data just on Douglas and Shawnee County, which I think would be helpful as you're making policy decisions. But let's talk about what we now do with the study itself. As far as what's happening around the state, what we've done is we've captured success stories, including some from Douglas County. You'll see this is from our executive profile, and it actually lists Tenants to Homeowners, a nonprofit in Lawrence that does great work as an example of how to run homeowner assistance for the state of Kansas. So again, speaks well for your community. As far as next steps for the state of Kansas, we've got things to work at KHRC, as well as with the Department of Commerce and our state legislature. We're looking at expanding investment for our moderate income housing program. Currently, we get about $2 million a year for that program. We would love to expand it. Right now, we're spending 69 cents per Kansan per year for housing. We know that we've got so much more need, and it's not just in rural or urban areas. Expanding MIH would allow us to expand into urban areas, to have larger grants, and we've got wonderful opportunities from ARPA to State General Fund. Some other takeaways at the state level are that we could work with the Department of Commerce to have state business incentives for housing, just like they do for jobs. To have state housing extension officers, which is a wonderful model that's being utilized in other states. Finally, to work on our workforce development, that if we're going to have long-term people to build our houses, we've got to invest in the building trades. So those are the few of the items that we're going to be working on from the state perspective. But we also have great best practices that we've highlighted for local communities like Douglas County, like the city of Lawrence. And these include successful bond programs that we've seen in our state and in other states, success stories and ideas for utilizing your local ARPA dollars, just like we have for the state discretionary ARPA dollars. Lastly, I just want to make sure you know that we every year put on a housing conference. It's going to be at the Hyatt in Wichita this coming year, and we hope to continue the education and the dialogue in Wichita, and we'd love to have the city be a part of those discussions. I've got my contact information on the screen, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen now for just a moment. I'm going to show you where you can access the study itself, and I'm sorry, I shouldn't have actually done that quite yet. Let me share my screen one more time. And let me just pull up our website itself, which is at kshousingcorp.org. And I just want to show you where the study itself is located. You can scroll down and view not only the executive summary, which I kind of went through very quickly with you, and the statewide profile, but the regional assessment itself, which is literally hundreds of pages, but has about 15 pages just on Douglas County. Lastly, we do have a goals and strategies section that talks about both state and local ideas that we'd love to take some time to explore. So let me stop sharing my screen. Let me just field any questions you have. And again, I just appreciate this opportunity to talk tonight.
Mayor Shipley, thank you. That's so kind of you to be here. And are there any questions from commissioners?
Commissioner Littlejohn, and I echo Mayor Shipley. Thank you so much for coming and presenting. Really appreciate it, Mr. Vincent. And one question I did have in looking at the immense amount of information that you guys are able to gather is, would you be able to go into any sort of prevalence of nonprofit profit relationships that there might be across the state, or private public partnerships that you've seen? How common is it, and what are some great examples?
Wonderful question, Commissioner, and I'd be happy to do that because I think that's the ultimate takeaway. There's two goals for this study. The first is education. It's educating policymakers. It's educating housing funders like Kansas Housing on how best to utilize our resources. But then ultimately, it's also about the process itself, and it's about connecting people so that people like you as policymakers in the city of Lawrence have some ideas because it is overwhelming, the amount of need and the amount of examples that are out there. So let me share a couple of the ideas that are stressed in here. One is that we've got actual examples, whether you are in inner city, KCK, or Wichita, or even Lawrence, about nonprofits and for-profit developers that do great work we also have ideas for rural communities. One that comes to mind right now is Little Norton, Kansas, or I'm sorry, it is Norton, Kansas, that has done a fabulous job of connecting the community foundation in the community. They've done a great job of connecting their local hardware store and their senior center. And they've got a comprehensive assessment of what their housing needs were. And then they went to their funders and they have ideas so that if they just want to incentivize people in their community to maybe paint their house, we've captured stories about now how they can go and take a voucher to the local hardware store. They can use money from their community foundation. They can get paint to fix up their home, which will then fix up and encourage their neighbors to fix up their neighborhood. And it's a quick win-win-win with a little bit of investment from a variety of sources. Those are the types of ideas, whether it's the land bank in Douglas County and the city of Lawrence, that's a great model for success. Whether it's rental assistance, like the Housing Stabilization Collaborative that I'd mentioned, which is being lifted up as a real model, how a couple of nonprofits can identify some needs in your community and work with the state and work with advocates to come up with solutions so that we can get dollars out the door to help your citizens. So those types of examples, even though the study is large, are throughout the study. And we really encourage you and your housing department and your local chamber of commerce and your nonprofits to start digging into the materials and those best practices.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. And I just had an additional question with that, Commissioner Littlejohn. Were there any examples outside of the state of Kansas that you might know of?
Another excellent question. We certainly recognize that the state and our communities don't have all the answers. What we see are that there are real models of success from rural areas and urban areas in Nebraska and Oklahoma and Missouri that we can highlight. Similarly situated Midwestern communities that have similar political structures and have similar constraints on their resources, and yet they've recognized that in order to address long-term systemic housing problems, we need to work together. And that's what we've highlighted in the report. That's why we worked with RDG, which actually is officed out of Nebraska, even though it's done a number of local Kansas community housing assessments. Because what we need to be doing is capturing these stories and connecting our stakeholders. So that's something that we've started the process of, but it's also something that is on all of us at the state level and at your community level, so that not only are we highlighting those stories, but folks like Leah are able to reach out to some of those examples that we highlight and some of those contacts, whether it's a successful bond program in Iowa that has managed to use tax-exempt bonds to do some actual housing development, or whether it's something like what I'd mentioned in Norton, just a small little replicable local program that's starting to get some small homeowner rehab successes. So yes, we've got great resources and neighbors around us that we're capturing those stories in this study.
This is Leah Roseland, Affordable Housing Administrator. Commissioner Littlejohn, I also just wanted to add, in addition to what Ryan spoke to, so all the commissioners are aware, we do have a housing toolkit on the City of Lawrence Affordable Housing webpage. And for any commissioners or community members who might be interested in evidence-based or best practices or promising practices for increasing housing affordability and in local government and local communities, that's a great resource. And myself and the Affordable Housing Advisory Board would be really interested in any solutions that pique your interest or that you would like us to dig further into for further exploration.
Commissioner Littlejohn, thank you for that, Leah. I'll definitely visit that, and I appreciate the extension of an invitation.
Commissioner Finkelstein, Ryan, thanks. I'll also say thanks for being here and the report and just doing the report. I think, as you said, it's been a long time coming, and so it's good to see that. Obviously, I know you're working on some funding issues. Are there any legislative issues you've put forward that we should be following and possibly encouraging passage of, besides just the funding aspects of that?
Your question has never been more timely than it is right now. We've got our friends back at the State House. And it is so vital that they hear from stakeholders outside of our office. We've been kind of the lonely voice in the wilderness for so many years, saying that we've got to invest in housing. We can't just react to every disaster, whether it's a pandemic or whether it's a tornado, that we're simply putting a Band-Aid, and we need to be addressing the underlying systemic housing issues, lack of safe, affordable, accessible housing in our state. And again, your community has been so progressive, but it's key that you're talking to your state legislators about things like investing in moderate income housing. It's an area that we don't have a resource for right now. We've got some, not enough, dollars available for low income affordable housing development. But there is an income band that makes too much to qualify for the federal programs, but simply does not make enough money to meet the market needs. And that's in Lawrence, and that's in Iola, and that's in Dodge City, and it's in Wichita, and everything in between. It's our nurses, it's our firefighters, it's our teachers, it's the folks that we want and need in our communities. And until they hear from you and your Chamber of Commerce and your realtors and your bankers and your nonprofits, only then will they start to invest in housing, moderate income and affordable alike. Other ideas that we're hearing about are some kind of flexible regulations to allow the Department of Commerce, as an example, to start investing using some of their dollars that are going towards economic development for jobs to now be used for housing. It's expanding their rural housing incentive district. There's other bills that I'm seeing on the horizon that would be tax credits or down payment incentives. We're open to resources, and ultimately the legislators and our city councils are the policymakers. But we know that our state is capable of investing more than 69 cents per Kansan per year in housing. That if we're going to have healthy neighborhoods, if we're going to have good jobs, then we need sustained funding long-term for housing, because we are competing against developers and contractors. We're trying to attract developers and contractors and are competing against Oklahoma and Missouri and Nebraska, who have dollars available from their state to invest in housing and attract those contractors and developers. So those types of conversations are what we've got to be having at the State House, but we also need to make sure that they're being had with the state Spark task force, which is making decisions right now on how to invest once in a generation dollars that are available for infrastructure or for housing. And those are the decisions that you all are having to make at the local level. So I guess the last piece of that, Commissioner, is just to say that we encourage you to have those discussions about using some of your limited local ARPA dollars for housing, because we've got to all be investing to avoid this disaster response that we find ourselves in time after time.
This is Commissioner Sellers, and I got a little happy there because I thought maybe Commissioner Finkelstein was going to ask my question, but I'll go ahead and lead into it a little bit more with you, Ryan, from the legislative perspective. In the governor's budget, there was highlighted $20 million to address housing. And although Director Prophet didn't necessarily go into details about what that would look like, he did say that that would be a program administered through the Department of Commerce, through the Housing Corporation, your entity. And so could you, if you are able to or at liberty to, do you have a knowledge or understanding of what those dollars could potentially be used for? Do you believe it would be used to address that 69 cents or to infuse more dollars into moderate income housing? Could you just kind of share a little bit on that?
Yeah, absolutely, Commissioner. I appreciate your interest and knowledge that investment is out there and that idea. We were so pleased to see the governor's budget contain that. Actually, it would be in addition to $2 million we normally get for the moderate income housing program. So it would be an 11-fold increase, a one-time investment in that program of level of funding we've never seen before, which is accurately reflecting the need that's out there. A couple issues with that. First of all, that program currently is limited to rural communities. That's communities that are under 60,000 population. Our hope is that the additional money would allow us to not only increase the size of our grants, but depending on the structure that comes with it, open it up to more urban areas as well. Because the city of Lawrence and city of Topeka and a number of other more urban areas certainly have housing needs that are reflected in our housing study, and you're all very well aware of as well. But through that program, we are responsive to local needs. So a community can come to us and tell us that they need investment in infrastructure, that they want to use their dollars for actual housing development, whether that's gap financing, whether it's down payment assistance, whether it's demo. The beauty of that program is that it is so flexible because it's not federal funds. And that's the challenge that we have, is that we're getting all of this federal money right now, but it can only be used for just a small sliver of the need that's out there. The dollars, whether it's ARPA or whether it's the MIH program that you reference, would allow us actual development, which has been sorely needed in rural and urban areas alike. So my hope is that those additional dollars would allow us to expand our program to serve more communities, including urban areas, to increase the size of our grant and potentially even to work outside of our traditional grantees, which under the $2 million program is limited to cities and counties in rural communities. We'd love to be able to fund habitat affiliates directly or community housing development organizations. And we're able to do that indirectly because we allow our cities and counties that apply for MIH to partner with those great organizations. But it's possible, depending on whatever rules come with these funds, that we can expand the program, expand the grantees, and expand the impact of what we can do with those dollars.
Thank you, Ryan. This is Commissioner Sellers again. In going through the report and looking at the snapshot for Shawnee and Douglas County, one of the survey questions that asked what types of housing solutions would you support to reduce the cost of housing? And I know for our area, it was about 49% or 48.9 said that public development of infrastructure. And so I know you shared a little bit about local government, local communities utilizing their city ARPA dollars, or as well as the tranche of money that we have on the state level that's being administered by the Spark Task Force and opportunities to utilize those dollars for that. So I'm glad you shared that and was able to speak on that and enlighten those of the public who would be, who are listening this evening on this. To dig a little bit deeper into that very same question, it looks like about 41% of respondents said that Section 8 housing choice vouchers, rental subsidies would be a type of solution to support reducing cost of housing. And I know that choice vouchers speaks to a source of income and having property managers, landlords who accept housing choice vouchers. So I guess going into the report, did the consultant look into source of income and how that relates to communities' ability to provide affordable housing, knowing that there may be some pushback in some communities where you have individuals who have a voucher, but they're unable to find a landlord or a property manager that would accept it, although it is a form of income. And so can you speak a little bit to that? If that was a point of emphasis in the report, or did some of that come up in conversations that you heard with stakeholders through your roadshows?
Yes, it actually came up in several different listening tours and some of those stakeholder meetings that we talked about. The biggest area was actually Wyandotte County. We heard from at the Unified Government's public hearing that they actually had to return some funds, some vouchers to HUD because there weren't enough landlords that were willing to go through the process and the education to accept those vouchers. And that's a struggle. And we know that it happens everywhere, but particularly Wyandotte County, we're hearing it, as well as Sedgwick County. I think there's an educational component to that. And I think as far as just the commission itself, I know you all have to go through some difficult decision-making. I've already highlighted you as an example of not only your just progressive housing knowledge and thoughts, but also the fact that you've got a local housing fund, I'm trying to remember the name of this. We have a state housing trust fund. I believe that you call it the Lawrence Housing Fund. That is a wonderful
housing tax, sales tax.
Yeah.
So that's a wonderful resource to be able to make investment, as well as the local ARPA dollars that you talked about. And you're in the delicate and predicament of having to make decisions of whether you apply what you put towards rental assistance and people that are needing supportive housing services or actual housing development. And that's not an easy decision, and it's a policy decision that you have to make. But I think you can use things like the housing study to help frame the conversation. And a couple of ideas that I've recommended to folks are that you use the most flexible dollars for the most flexible purpose. So if you've already got rental assistance available from other means, whether that's the Kansas Emergency Rental Assistance Program or tenant-based rental assistance, that we make sure that we're utilizing those dollars that free up your more flexible dollars for actual housing development. And I know that's easier said than done, and it's important to meet all of the needs simultaneously. But that's the type of guidance that I usually recommend to folks. And I think that our study can help inform and make those policy decisions for you all.
Mayor Shipley, any other questions?
Yes, this is Vice Mayor Larson. I had one question, Ryan. You had talked about the program where it limits it to populations of less than 60,000 people, and you said that they were looking to maybe expand that. Is that something that's expanded at a federal level or a state level, if it could be?
I appreciate the question, Vice Mayor, and it's actually that's a state program. So that's the beauty of that one, is that it's the $2 million a year that currently fund the program by statute are limited to rural communities, and that's communities defined under 60,000 population. I'm assuming with the governor's proposal that the dollars would be treated separately and not subject to that same requirement. But I haven't actually seen this in bill form yet, so it's going to depend on what ultimately passes the state legislature. If it's simply an allocation, a line item in a funding bill, then our interpretation will be that it could be expanded to urban areas and to other grantees and to larger grants. And that gives us maximum flexibility to meet your community's needs.
Thank you, Commissioner, Vice Mayor Larson again. Is there anything that we can do to encourage that, to talk to anybody or help with that situation?
I'd certainly encourage you to talk to your local delegation in the legislature to make sure that they're aware of this possible investment, that they're supportive of it, but also that they're watching out to ensure that there's, the greater flexibility that we can give to our office to administer the program to meet local needs is key. That's why the program has been so successful. It's why we've been able to leverage $7 in outside dollars for every $1 we're receiving. Talk about a return on investment that you get year after year after year. But it's also the reason the program has been so successful. Federal programs are wonderful, but they're challenging because there are so many restrictions. Our program is able to fund just about every eligible housing activity. So as long as we maintain that maximum flexibility, but we also talk to our legislative delegations about expanding it, allowing us to actually serve more urban areas that have important needs that are currently unmet. That's going to be key to making this successful for your community as well.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Mayor Shipley, any other questions?
It's Commissioner Sellers. No questions, but again, thank you, Ryan, for this presentation. I think what you showed with us having with the state assessment, it definitely complements the work that was done in 2018 and what we have with our housing toolkit. You know, these are two, these are multiple documents that complement each other. And then again, it's helpful resources for us as commissioners to think about strategies and policy opportunities for us in our community. Since we are fortunate to have implemented a few of these strategies already, what can we do to continuously elevate that work to address the affordability need here? So thank you for the work that was put into this with the consultant and the work of your office. And, you know, I know we talked about Lawrence being progressive and great, and you know, this was one report that highlighted that, but it also shows that we do still have work to do in the area of how do we continue to move us in a way of addressing housing for all and affordability for all.
I appreciate that, Commissioner. And I may just add, I did forget to mention that we are going to have a story map component that's going to be able to be accessible to not just your housing office and your nonprofits and your different stakeholders, but it's going to be a real-time data tool that's going to be posted on our website shortly that will make it a much more interactive study so that it won't just sit and collect dust on the shelf, that it's going to be used at our level, at the state, and certainly at the local level, and it's going to be a nice interactive tool for your constituents. So we'll get that posted and shared with your stakeholders in the very near future.
Mayor Shipley, thank you. That's great. I do want to make sure we don't have any public comment on this item. Sherry?
Not in the room, and we're checking Zoom now. It looks like there's no public comment on this item.
Okay, well then I will bring it back. Make sure no one has any other comments or questions for Ryan. This was really edifying, and I'm really glad this was brought to our attention, something we could look at, and I'm excited about any new tools that come with it. So again, any other comments? No, thank you again, Mr. Vincent, for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity, and keep up the great work on the housing front.
Yes, and as always, thank you to Leah for all the work that you're doing with all the coordination and keeping these connections and communications open. Thank you so much. Let's carry on from our work session. Are there any commission items this evening?
This is Commissioner Sellers. For a future work item, I'd like for us to revisit Resolution 7070. That particular resolution is in regards to how we govern appropriations and expenditures for public art. Specifically, what I'm looking at is our interpretation of that particular resolution. And I'd like the opportunity to engage with my fellow commissioners on the possibility of us review. Sorry, because I was reading my notes here. So, so just looking at how the resolution is written and to entertain maybe change or discussion on how we interpret implementing that particular resolution. Not sure if it would be a need of a text amendment. I don't see that being the case, but just more discussion along how we identify allocation of those funds and what those funds should be utilized for. So again, this predates me, but something that I feel like is an opportunity for us to discuss it as we go into the next budget cycle and its relationship to CIP projects. So,
Mayor Shipley, I want to agree and disagree at the same time. Agree.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I agree. I would love to review it. I don't necessarily see for me, the issue isn't entirely in the interpretation, but I think we might want to consider rebalancing it. So if I could give an example, not to get too far into it this evening, some artists I heard from the public suggested, well, instead of making one chunk of money that goes to one giant project, could we peel off parts of it to do a lot of smaller projects? Right. And it doesn't appear to allow for that. And I just thought, that's a fair point. So I would love to have that discussion with you. I would just maybe say I would be a little more open-minded to maybe making changes if we want to.
Okay, well, this is Commissioner Sellers. I am seeing that this is my first rodeo in presenting the opportunity for a text amendment to a resolution. I'm here for it. This is what I do at my day job. So if we want to open something up, we open it up. You don't ever open up one. We say in regulation writing, when you open up when you open up a statute to address one thing, you open up it all for review and interpretation. So at that point, I'm totally open for it. So
yeah, is there at least another commissioner who's also interested in this conversation?
Yeah, this is Vice Mayor Larson. I am interested in that. Just some of the projects we've worked with in the past few years. I think it definitely warrants a relook at, so to speak, and determine if this is still the route we want to go with this. I believe the resolution was written in 1986, I believe, what I'm reading here. I guess it was also redone in 2014. So it's time to revisit it. I agree.
Mayor Shipley, any other agreement on this? You're open to? Okay, great. I hear consensus, Craig. In as much as this item touches on things in our strategic plan, and this may be kind of the minutia of, I wonder if you could tell us how to direct you in some of our comments. What are your thoughts?
City Manager Craig Owens, I'm glad we're putting it in the context of the strategic plan. There is some important work that's going to be done in that area for unmistakable identity, I think. So give us some time to digest it. We understand the intent is to relook at this regulation, and if there's some better ways to match up with where we're trying to go with strategic plan, have the commission be able to reconsider and adapt to that. So I would say give us some time to come up with a plan, and we'll certainly be bringing it back to you and give you some options on that. Well, within, I would say, a 60-day period, if that'll work. I don't know that there's any big projects that are running at us, but certainly if there are, then we'll be sensitive to understanding your time frame for trying to get the next thing under the new policy.
Mayor Shipley, thank you, Craig. I hope that I see nods for people who can't see everyone. Sounds like that's a good time frame, an acceptable time frame for us. Is there any other commission items? Come on, you got something you want to throw out there. I'm kidding. All right.
It's Commissioner Sellers, I do, but I'm pacing myself.
Yes. Thank you. Mayor Shipley, I'm sure staff also thanks you. Let's move on to our next agenda item, which is the city manager's report.
Thank you, City Manager Craig Owens. We have 3 items on there tonight. the one I'll put some special emphasis to is the update on the 2023 budget process. We are, I think, into our third week of the fiscal year, and we're talking about building the plan for the next fiscal year. So as you know, we have quite a gap and a challenge to our structural budget. And we're trying to be very thoughtful about how we approach that in the priority-based budgeting methodology. And we brought some outside resources in, some experts nationally to try and help us work through that with Resource X. And staff work has actually been pretty robust, involving a lot of city staff pretty deep into the organization at developing some ideas, generating some ideas that will help us wrestle with this pretty good challenge that we have. So we're trying to do a lot of work up front so that we can bring it towards the community and the commission in a way that gives a wide range of options and that addresses the, the fundamental issue, which is a big gap. So I've been really excited about how broad ranging it is and thoughtful it is. Having a strategic plan is very useful in trying to understand what we're in and what we're not in. But it is a lot of work, and I can't say that we have any big eureka moments. We have a lot of ideas at this stage, but we probably have 50 people in the organization plus that have touched it and touched this process and that are developing ideas. And this is pretty early in any budget process. So pleased to share some of those results as it comes up, and we do anticipate public engagement, this being a part of it. We just want to wrestle with some of these ideas and refinement of the numbers so that it can be useful and people that don't do this all day long can engage with us successfully in the process that's ahead of us.
Mayor Shibley, thank you. I probably should have said this in commission items, but you're there. So I did want to acknowledge our new chief of police who was sworn in today, and maybe you'd like to comment on that, or maybe he'd like to say something if he's still here. I can't see all the squares, so I'm not sure. But I did want to congratulate you and say thank you. I'm sure we were all watching. Sadly, we couldn't be there. And I hope you'll accept our apologies under the circumstances with COVID that we could not be there with you. But thank you again.
Thank you, Mayor Shipley. Chief Rich Lockhart here. I'm no longer the soon-to-be chief, but now the actual chief. Although during the swearing in, I was a little confused. I thought I was back in Warrensburg. I thought I heard somebody say we're not in Kansas anymore. So much apologies to everyone. It's like the rock band who forgets which city they're in. Had a great couple of days. Rode along with a couple of officers yesterday and had a little what I called a soft first day. And Craig keeps having to remind me that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I appreciate that because I don't like to sit still. So I'm trying to rein myself back in. Had a great second day today and getting to know a lot of folks. And my family really enjoyed how special Porter and the staff made the swearing in. And so we really want to thank them for that. They did a fantastic job. My parents all the way in Grand Lake, Michigan were able to see it. My son, who's working down at the plaza at Meyer, whatever their second name is, got to see it. So it was really cool. Love the technology. Looking forward to working with all of you and our wonderful community and the men and women of the I almost did it again, the Lawrence Police Department. I know. So anyway, thanks for giving me a few minutes of your time tonight.
Mayor Shipley, thank you. I appreciate that. Let's move on to calendar items.
Mayor, City Manager Craig Owens, you've got to take public comment on.
Oh my goodness. Yes, this is a public comment item. Thank you so much. Is there any public comment on the city manager's report?
Sherry Reedman, City Clerk, there is no public comment on this item.
Thank you so much, Sherry. Okay, yes, now onto the calendar. Any things we need to bring up for commissioners? All right, well, I guess thank you then is in order to everyone for this evening. I guess I would entertain any motions to adjourn.
This is Vice Mayor Larson. I move to adjourn.
Commissioner Finkel, second.
Mayor Shipley, I have a first and a second. Vice Mayor Larson?
Aye.
Commissioner Finkeldine?
Aye.
Commissioner Littlejohn?
Aye.
Commissioner Sellers?
I was going to say nay, but I'll say aye.
Mayor Shipley, I also say aye. That's 5-0. Thank you again, everyone. We won't see you next week, but we'll see you in February. Have a lovely week.